to co-chair the task force to bring the kids back. And if ever there was a human rights issue, about the right of families to be together and of children to be in their own homeland. And so it's my privilege to be in that role in this particular piece of work in Ukraine. You see that I'm proudly wearing a lovely scarf, and everyone comments on it because it says "Justice for Ukraine" on it. And this is what we're talking about today, is the whole business of justice for Ukraine. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights has informed my legal practice. I'm a lawyer, and my legal practice over many, many decades has involved civil and political rights, human rights, and I've a real and deep feeling that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the thing that we have to keep hold of if we want to have a fair and just world. Children are half those forcibly displaced around the world. Minors are disproportionately affected by war. And we know that already the children of Ukraine have suffered greatly. I always think that if there ever was a story I would like to have been part of, it would have been to be there when Eleanor Roosevelt drew together lawyers and jurists from around the world to her apartment in Washington Square in New York. And she invited great lawyers, judges, scholars in the law to her home, and they were from everywhere. And they were from the East and from the West, and they were from what was then the Soviet Union. They were from Canada, from Latin America, from the Middle East. And there were people of very different religions and of very different ideological beliefs. And she posed one question, which was, can't we have world law to prevent terrible crimes of inhumanity? And the Nuremberg trials had just ended, and the horrors of what had happened in the Holocaust was informing the creation of a world order and the United Nations and a whole set of conventions and an upgrading of the Geneva Conventions on the laws of war. And so she posed this question to these lawyers and judges and said, how can we have world law? And they pointed out to her that it wasn't likely to be very successful because what you needed to do and start with was a set of principles which would then inform the different legal systems that nations have. Because law usually comes out of the history, the traditions, the customs, and the wellspring of what makes a people have the rules that combine them in their communities. And so the discussions then moved on to, well, what do people need in order to thrive as human beings? And the recognition was that we share a common humanity, and that we have to have as a starting point the very things that people need in order to be fully human. And so it's obvious, isn't it, that we want to live, we want the right to life, we want to be free, we want to be secure and not live in fear day to day, live in fear of our life being taken, or of arbitrary arrest and being thrown in prison, or being made a slave, forced to work for nothing or not the value of our work, to be treated in those kinds of inhumane ways. We never want to experience torture, and there isn't any of us who wouldn't know what that must be like, to be tortured and what it does to someone, but also what it does to the people who torture in their humanity. And so the discussions, and there are records of them, and if you read them, they are incredibly illuminating about what we need to create good societies. And it's why, for me, the Universal Declaration is so important, and has to be translated into the laws and practices of our own societies and our own lives. Eleanor Roosevelt has said in the speeches she made afterwards that it should also be part of the small things that we do in our daily lives, the way we treat each other, our workmates, the people we stand alongside, the people we marry, the people who are our lovers, our children. That our relationships should be based on that human respect and respect for the dignity of the other. And in one of those questions was of what do we need to thrive? Where, of course, the idea that we should be able to love as people who yearn to love and to be loved, and the right to family life, and the right to be able to create a family. But then it gets bigger than that, which is the right to belong to a nation, and not to have that sense of nationhood taken away from you either. And it's there in the Universal Declaration, at Article 15, that everyone has the right to a nationality. And what I'm seeing, and in taking evidence in relation to the task force on the taking of children into Russia, and the efforts to Russify them, to turn them into young Russians, is a way of denying someone their nationality, their sense of place in the world, their sense of who they are, the denying of identity. And so the seriousness of that cannot be forgotten. And I wanted to just run through a number of things that have been somewhat alarming to me. First of all, the sheer numbers, in that Ukraine has been working hard. Your government, your ombudsman, those of you who are engaged with the whole business of trying to hold society together at a time of war. And that the idea that there are 19,546 children on a list that's been created, and where there have been steps taken to verify where those children have come from, how they've been displaced. The Russian official figures show that 700,000 Ukrainian children received by Russia, according to one report of the Russian Children's Rights Commissioner, have been taken, and they said, for their own well-being and for their own safety. But those children, many of them in Russian re-education camps. The Yale Conflict Observatory has identified 43 facilities, but the exact number they indicate is very much higher. And the network of those facilities stretches from one end of Russia to the other. The furthest camp being in Magadan Oblast, Russia's far east near the Pacific Ocean, almost 3,900 miles from Ukraine's border with the Russian Federation. That camp is roughly 3 times closer to the United States than it is to the border of Ukraine. And yet Ukrainian children have been moved there. And it's become very clear that one of the primary purposes is the re-education of children. And you have to ask yourself the question as to why. And undoubtedly one of the whys, and one of the reasons, is to demoralize the Ukrainian people. And I pay tribute to the way in which the Ukrainians are firm in their determination to have their children back, but their determination not to be demoralized. But just think of the pain in the hearts of people who know the grandparents, parents, relatives, who know that some of their children have gone. And some of them very small children, not taken from institutions, but children who were taken into hospitals after, for example, the bombing of Mariupol, and who then, on recovery, incapable of giving details, not carrying papers, parents possibly already dead, or certainly not there, and the children then be moved into Russia, and the great challenge of ever being able to identify them and recover them to bring them home. Now, that whole challenge of the displacement of children is a human rights issue, and the world recognises it. And I want to just